I have severe insomnia. Welcome to the club. I was diagnosed when I was still a junior in high school. My parents found me in the kitchen, making pancakes at 3 AM. I hadn't slept in 4 days. Ever since, whatever stress hits me, I have to take my pills to get asleep. Of course, it is helpful sometimes to stay awake for longer. I can do much more when I'm not sleeping. I already learnt 2 languages that way, and countless assignments were done in quite a few hours after midnight. But the advantages only come for short. Staying awake for more than 3 days only lowers my productivity. If you don't rest for too long, all you do is bang your head against a wall. Besides, even the most loving and compassionate person has their limits when tired, and I'm already not very fond of people, to be honest. My mood is unbearable after the 4th day. Right now, I'm in college. I've decided to take a road trip for a certain highway with my friend Sebastian, just for the thrill of it. We both know how to drive, so it wouldn't be a problem if the driver needed to rest. Our destination would be our natal city, to visit his parents for their anniversary. After 5 sons, I don't know if his mother sees me more as her daughter or as a possible daughter-in-law, but what matters is that she makes the best apple pie in the world and is the nicest person on the planet. We were happy to come home to her. Naturally, we left on Friday afternoon and prepared to drive through the desert. I remembered it was past 11 and we decided to stop. That Pacific highway a lot of times is surrounded by miles and miles of deserts. You rarely see a restaurant or a city to stop and eat at, so when we saw that there was a small diner in the middle of nowhere, it was our call to stop. Now, this plaque a few miles back indicated that we were between some small cities on our map, in a big straight line with no exits for at least a couple of towns before and after that lonely diner. Sebastian then went to park and we found that the parking lot was empty. That didn't strike us as strange because that diner and gas station was in the middle of nowhere. They sure as hell don't have that many visitors, especially not when it's this late or off season. Rather, I'd find it weird if it had lots of cars. It was an old diner, your typical 50s style with neon lighting glowing fairly light in the darkness. Inside I could see the bright fluorescent light shining upon the turquoise walls. There wasn't a single soul inside, although the neon plaque indicated it was open. As soon as we stepped in, we could feel something different. I never felt such an acute urge to leave. The place was calm and clean, but that peaceful piano version of Suspicious Minds only made my heart jump in pure dread. We sat on a table near the door in silence, waiting for somebody, anyone to appear. There was something about that place that really made reality feel a bit loose. I suppose that's what happens in isolated places, when there aren't people around to confirm what you've just experienced. It was a wild, brand new feeling for me, and equally terrifying. But soon, a voice surprised us. "Hiya, welcome to Papa's Diner, how can I help you?" It was an old lady, maybe in her 60s, smiling like a grandmother. Her teeth were perfectly straight, slightly yellow, and completely fake. There was something motherly about her, but I could sense something else, ominous and very malicious. Can we get... What do you want, Casey?" Sebastian asked me. "Do you have pancakes with eggs and sausage and coffee for us?" "Yeah." "So the same for me, and 2 coffees please." Alright, I'll be back in a minute," she said, going to the back of the kitchen with the music still playing, and I didn't know if I was shivering from fear or the cold. I know one thing, it was damn cold in there. Soon enough, our food was there, and we had our time eating under a 50s piano. Now, the food was surprisingly good. Actually, considering how far and isolated this place was, why even bother to make the best meal available if it's the only option in miles? I guess the lady just liked to cook for people. That's probably the only reason this diner was still open, I'm guessing, because there wasn't a great flow of people through this highway either. Hell, we couldn't even remember seeing another single car within at least 3 hours. This place sure wasn't making a lot of money. I I remember that we discussed who should be paying. Even broke college students still have some pride in paying their own bills every once in a while, you know. In the end, we agreed to split it in half. While Grandma thought it was such a modern thing for couples to share the check, we didn't bother to correct her. Soon we left. The sounds of the desert were comforting like a hug. This place still bugged me for some reason though. It was like we wasn't supposed to be there, you see. The more you think about it, the less sense everything makes. There was no house near, nor a city, so where did Grandma live? Also, why was she open at such an inconvenient time when it's obviously off season and nobody's going through the road? I didn't know. The whole thing felt sketchy. I was eager to leave, and since Sebastian was tired, I took over the driver's role. Now, our drive started off peacefully to begin with. For the next few hours, I drove in silence. The road was dark and empty, cutting through the desert sharply, but I wasn't tired. I hadn't slept the night before, but I was still in pretty good shape. Actually, my activity peak is usually on my second night awake. It's when I do most in less time, you see. So you can imagine my surprise when I started to feel weird. I don't know how to actually explain what I was feeling back then. Now I do remember that I started feeling it when my ears were closing up, like when you're underwater, deafening the sounds around me. All of a sudden, the radio playing a generic indie music was louder than it had been before. And not long after that, I felt something in the car with us. Now, we've all heard that stupid urban legend about the man in the back seat, but can you imagine how terrifying it is to think that maybe this time it isn't just a tale? We locked the car at the diner, yet I couldn't shake this feeling that there was a third person in the car with us. I couldn't force myself to look back, and I don't know, I just felt really off. And while I was battling those demons to keep on driving, Sebastian was sound asleep. I thought maybe I should focus on the road more, as this situation would hopefully pass. After a few miles, I saw some really bright stars, and they looked really big as well, but those stars started to move. I pulled the car right then. Sebastian ended up waking up, but he didn't worry me. I just told him, look out of your window and see if there's anything out of place. Would you? He said, but I was dead serious, and he ended up not questioning my order. The fear in his eyes said it all. Casey, what the hell is this? I don't know really. Those lights were dancing in the sky, going up and down and left and right, and there were about a dozen of them. They were bigger than stars, almost the same size as the moon. I can't even put into words how terrifying it was realizing this. I was so frightened. It was like an exotic and dangerous animal in front of me. During episodes of severe insomnia, it may happen that you see things that aren't really there, like a mad glitch. You put your keys up beside your table, but the next morning, they are next to the couch and you didn't realize that you were seeing in detail. You take a vague shape and give it whatever it is for its easiest form for your brain. Now here's the thing, I never had hallucinated, but everything has its first time, right? Is this real? I thought it wasn't, until Sebastian confirmed it. Now 2 people don't hallucinate the same thing. It was real. Too real. Now, I don't know for how long we stayed there, mesmerized and horrified at the same time. Could have been 10 minutes or 2 hours, I really can't tell you. Now, I don't even know how we made it to the closest city in safety. All I know is that the next morning, we tried to explain it in the most rational way possible. That adorable old lady drugged us and we were tripping that night. I don't know. We did phone Sebastian's parents the next day to say that we were going to be late, coming up with an excuse so we could make it back to that diner. Was it a bad idea? Obviously, but we did it anyway. We went back to that same road trying to find it. We didn't. We went back and forth that patch, even going further until the last city we stopped at before the diner. But we couldn't find it anywhere, and we even asked the locals about it and just received confused looks. There was no diner on that part of the highway. A few questions remained, and I'm afraid I can't answer them. Things simply stopped making sense at some point. What were those orbs we saw? Who was the old lady that served us? And if it wasn't a diner, then what was it that night? So, as a kid at around 11 or 12, I had the world on a plate. We had these woods around us that I never came close to finding the end of. I would wake up early in the morning when school was out, and my friend John and I would spend the entire day mucking around in these woods. We would pack sandwiches and sodas and just go nuts. We would play army, cowboys and Indians, you name it, we did it. This being the 80s, John and I were smart enough kids. My parents had no problem with this and enjoyed taking us to the army surplus to buy stuff like MREs and survival kits and knives and whatnot. It was actually pretty regular that we'd set up a camp close to our property and just stay there overnight. So not on an overnighter, but a one day that we were playing, we found a tree house in part of the woods that we'd never been to before. Probably about a 2-hour trek from the edge of the neighbourhood, maybe 2 or 3 miles away. It was hilly and rocky. Seriously a kid's dream. The tree house is probably 30 feet off the ground, but it looks solid. We are stoked as we find our new castle. We hightail it to home to go and get some rope and stuff to quickly bring down the surplus supplies. John and I can't shut up about it over dinner. The next day comes and we hike out at almost dawn. We got a backpack full of rope and sandwiches and our knives and the rest of our stuff that we thought we would need. We eventually do make it there, and we spend a good few hours making a rope ladder so that way we can climb up there. We throw it up to the top and we play rock, paper and scissors to figure out who has to go in first. John wins and goes in first. Though when he comes out, he's white as a ghost and he wants to immediately go home. I'm curious as to what he's seen. The treehouse is probably 8 by 8 and is about 7 or 8 high inside. As I climb up to look inside, I see that every single inch of the walls are covered in illegal porn. I really didn't know what to make of any of this, and John and I immediately got home as quick as we can. We informed my pops about it and he immediately phoned the police. The officer shows up and asks us a few questions like where is it, how did we get there, where did we buy the rope, and did we take any pictures. He got increasingly rude about it and my dad actually got annoyed at him. He left with our statement and said that he would be in touch. We're no longer allowed to take overnights in the woods after that, and we can't go out for more than a few hours without checking in. We actually built a really long tin can phone with the permission of my parents, which allowed us a bit more freedom, but we were pretty cut off from exploring deeper into the woods. Now fast forward a few years later. The same cop actually stopped me when I was hanging out in a different park. He saw me smoking and caught me with some drugs. John asked him what happened with that treehouse and he just told us never to do drugs and left us alone. Many years later, John actually sent me an email saying how he read in a big town paper that the officer actually shot himself after he was found to be in possession of what was found. The thing that really creeps me out though is later in a state auction of some of his stuff, he was actually found to have that exact rope that we made.
I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friend Amy and I, both females, would spend most days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the quiet, desolate beauty of the desert. One afternoon in March 2010, we were travelling from Ruidoso to Albuquerque. Always up for exploring, we took a back road rather than travelling the more direct highway. One leg of our journey had us on the NM55. It's remote, teeny, tiny 2-lane highway. We loved those types of roads, up until that day. This part of New Mexico is flat and desolate desert. You can see for miles, and there is virtually nothing except for dirt and rocks between towns, and towns that can be miles apart. So we were on the NM55 going north. After a few minutes, we saw a white pickup truck ahead of us going the same direction. Suddenly, he stopped his truck sideways in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from him, and as we got closer, we began to get uneasy. We could see no reason for him to do this. We were the only other vehicle out there, and we began wondering if we should turn around rather than come up to him and have to stop. We were about half a mile away from him when he pulled over to the opposite side of the highway, but his truck was still pointed in the direction we were going to. We tried to relax a little. Surely this guy was a rancher or something. Maybe he was checking something on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. 1. There was only one person in the truck, a middle-aged guy who never took his eyes off us. And 2, he was talking into a walkie-talkie. A few seconds after we passed him, he pulled back onto the highway and started following us, but he never got too close. He would get to within a few car lengths, and then drop back a little, and then speed back up again to within a few car lengths. We were getting nervous. We realised how alone we were. We had seen no other traffic on that road, and we hadn't told anyone about our great idea to take this detour. We checked our cell phones, and neither one of us had signal, typical for remote New Mexico, but scary given our present situation. Amy was driving and speeding up, while I frantically checked the map, hoping to find a road that would have more traffic. There was no other road. We had to travel this one to get to the next town. Turning around to go back the other way didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. He was going very, very slowly, maybe 20 miles an hour, if that. This pickup was old and beat up, whereas the one behind us was newer. Amy had us up to 75 miles an hour, which wasn't typically for us on those 55 mile per hour highways, and we blew by the old pickup as we passed it. We saw that it was another middle-aged guy, and he was talking into a walkie-talkie. After that white pickup passed him, he did a U-turn and pulled in behind it. As we watched all this, we could see the white pickup truck guy talking into his walkie-talkie. No doubt these two knew each other. We were being deliberately followed, and for the first and only time in my life, I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road, but truly thought old beat up pickup guy had set up a trap in the road as our vehicle would be somehow disabled. We talked about driving into the fields. We were an SUV, but this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we went off the road and got cornered, so we stayed on the highway. By now, white pickup truck guy was right on top of us. We could see him talking into the walkie-talkie, and he stayed right on our bumper, and old beat up pickup truck guy was right on top of him. The three of us sped down the highway. The white pickup inched closer. His manoeuvring and edging closer made it apparent that he was trying to bump us. I watched helplessly as he got to within inches of our back bumper. Amy floored it and we were passing 80 miles an hour and edging up to 90. The road was flat and deserted, but any little thing gone wrong could have been catastrophic. We absolutely were not going to slow down or stop if we could help it. The white pickup pulled into the opposite lane and started to gain speed. The only thing we could think of is that he wanted to pass us and get in front of us. If he had got in front of us and his buddy was behind, then we'd be boxed in and trapped. We looked frantically at the rocky desert on both sides of us. Our only option was to off-road it. Should we risk it? Could we speed through the desert and make it to safety in one piece? As we topped a small incline, we saw a sign that said Salinas Pueblo Missions National Monument, and it pointed towards a road on the left. And right at that moment, a blue pickup truck pulled out of that road and onto the highway in front of us. As we came up to the blue pickup, we saw the plate said US Park Service. We looked at each other and looked behind us. Both pickup trucks did U-turns and went the other way. We followed the blue pickup to Mountain Air and made our way to Albuquerque. I don't know exactly what those guys' intentions were, but they weren't good. There is something seriously wrong out there. I notified the state police and they said they would keep an eye on things. This area is very near Belen, NM, which is where Tara Calico was abducted. It's also about 100 miles from the Elephant Boot. which is where David Parker Ray had his little secret torture laboratory. But we didn't put all that together until later. Even though David Parker Ray had died by the time this happened to us, we do believe that there are others out there like him. And whoever had abducted Tara has never been caught. Or maybe we came into meth lab territory. But since this happened on an actual highway, rather than a backcountry road, I tend to discount the meth lab theory. Whatever is going on out there, it's not good.
I used to work in defense, programming robots. I was stationed at an army depot in the Nevada desert, and we had a 4-wheeled robot we were building to guard the bunkers there. We were never told exactly what was in those bunkers, but I can only assume it was some advanced weapons. Anyway, the robot had a cluster of cameras on it, including an IR one. The infrared was really fun to play with at night. It sensed heat, so you could spot coyotes, rattlesnakes and rabbits and other desert creatures. One morning, I walked in our office. Everybody was crowded around the video console, watching the robots recording from the few previous hours. The video started with the robot driving its usual mindless route. Then, he picked up on something on radar, sounded his alarm and sped over to the radar bleep to get a closer look. When he got there, he pointed his colour camera, and there was nothing there. He then tried the infrared camera. This is when things got scary. There was a ghost standing in the desert in front of the robot. He looked to be a World War II soldier. He was in uniform with a rifle and a German Shepherd. The robot would be continuously toggling through the different cameras, the infrared and the colour, and the ghost kept on disappearing and coming back. Clearly the robot was confused. I'm pretty sure the ghost was confused as well. Eventually, the ghost decided he had better things to do and left. The robot then resumed its mindless route.
This happened 17 years ago, so please forgive me if exact details are a little fuzzy. It was the summer of 1999, and I was spending the vacation with my mother in New Mexico. I was a 12-year-old girl and going on 21, and had a severe attitude. I made friends easily with a few girls that lived just around the corner from my mum's house. We spent every moment together. That summer, we were a group of 4, all of us thinking we were older and smarter than everyone else. Nikki, Katie, Julie and myself were the last generation of home phone lines, playing outside on the trampoline until dark and sleepovers. We watched VHS tapes, listened to cassette tapes on our Walkman, and it was okay to let your children walk around the town at night, and we rarely locked the front door. We had no cell phones or internet. My backyard had a concrete wall around it and a gate. Behind the wall was a desert as far as the eye could see. Just barren wasteland of dirt, cacti, shrubs and mountain way all in the distance. This town had a major railroad track running straight through it, and there was a major street that had gas stations galore, restaurants, hotels and attractions. We all received these same warnings from our parents: stay out of the desert, stay away from the tracks, and don't walk onto the main strip at night. Do you think we listened? Absolutely not. Julie, Nikki and I spent our days walking through the desert, crossing the tracks, and down the strip to Katie's house. Sometimes we would just walk around till dusk. Some days we would go home to jump on my trampoline. This particular day, we got to Katie's house, prepared to stay the weekend because her parents were out of town, and we were having a party. The first night, the girls were jumping from a spiral staircase to a giant beanbag. I refused to participate in this due to my extreme fear of heights. We then got down to sleepover business, so to say, and decided to watch the original Exorcist. You know, the one with Linda Blair. Fucking scary shit, man. I didn't sleep. The second night, we all told our parents that Katie's mum, we obviously didn't tell our parents that we were alone, was going to drive us to the movies. We all got money for the movies, then promptly walked down the strip to get junk food at the little store. That's what we called it. Now, I wish I could say that we were aware of our surroundings, but we weren't. We were absolutely oblivious of the man who followed us all the way back to the house. I thought that I should mention that Katie's parents were loaded. They had a huge property with numerous buildings and broken down cars that her dad was remodeling. Their house had a large open kitchen, dining and living room. There were no walls and the whole room was lined with windows. There were 2 doors, front and back. The day went just as planned. We got our junk food and made it home safely. We made pizza in the oven, and for some reason, one of the girls turned on the TV to the news. As we were eating, we heard a story about staying indoors because there was a report of a suspicious man walking the strip. That's it, suspicious man. We laughed and joked about the man. Fast forward a few hours. I don't remember what happened, but as girls do, someone said that something hurt Julie's feelings, and she stormed out of the house. I went after her and opened the door, just in time to see her light up a cigarette. Yeah, we were bad kids. I sat her on a bench while she bitched about the other 2. Suddenly, the air got thick with anxiety. Julie felt it too. I quietly asked if she felt like we were being watched. She responded with a tiny nod, and then we were blinded. Someone was in a car in the driveway with their brights on us. My heart was racing as I stood up and pulled Julie out to the spot she seemed to be stuck in. As we turned to run inside, the man made a sound. I can't describe the sound other than a high-pitched squeal that turned into a growl. I was scared beyond all reason, but I somehow managed to get myself and Julie inside the house. As soon as we got inside, the headlights went off and it was pitch black again. I locked the door and turned off the light. By this time, Julie had regained her composure to tell the other 2 what had happened. As I frantically checked out the back door and turned off every light, I told them to shut up and listen by the back door. I heard the car door close, and I was praying to every god that he would go away. Then, right by my cheek, the door handle started to turn slowly, then frantically. I crawled away from the door and moved to where my friends were. For the next 2 or 3 hours, we sat there still as stone and listened to this man bang on every window and door trying to get inside. The phone was located across the room next to 2 windows. I finally got the courage to run to the phone and I called my mum. I told her that we were all home alone and someone was trying to get inside. I hung up with her and just waited. Julie screamed to the man that we called the cops, and all of a sudden the banging stopped. We sat and waited, listening to him get in his car, and then the sound again of the squall that turned into a growl, and then he was gone. My mum and stepdad showed up and checked the whole place out. They found tyre tracks and cigarette butts in the driveway where his car was, proving he had watched us for quite a while. The truly scary part were the scratch marks all over the doors and windows. Needless to say, Katie spent the rest of the weekend at Nikki's house and had a great story for her parents when they got home. Our parents didn't punish us for lying and being reckless. I guess 2 hours of torture at the hands of a madman was enough. We made a report to the police, but the man was never caught. Suspicious but creepy as hell.
My wife and I had just purchased our first home and had our first kid. The house was being built by the builders and we could drive past the house every so often just to have a look how it was all coming along. We started visiting the house at night and noticed that there was a car parked out in front of our own home. It was strange, but we figured it's probably just one of the workers leaving their car there. Sometimes the car was there, sometimes it wasn't. We didn't think too much of it. Fast forward a few months and our house is being built. The house is empty and we're slowly moving everything in during the first week. As for the mysterious car, it started showing up late at night but not parking directly in front of our house now, more like 50 feet away nearby a car park. Now, keep in mind, we're the only house on the block. This was a brand new development and we're literally the first home built. Now we're literally a house in the middle of the desert. My wife demands we buy a security system, so I do. She spent many nights alone because I work late at night. I spend most of the day unpacking and hanging out with my 6-month-old son. My wife is at work, and I realised that there are no diapers or anything, so I called my mother-in-law and asked her if she could go and swing by the store to go and drop some off. I didn't have my car that day, so I wouldn't have been able to get there. I tell her that I will leave the front door unlocked because I'm going to be taking a nap with my son. A few hours later, my son is asleep on the bed, so I decide to go and lay next to him. I lay down when I hear the door chime with the security alarm to the front door. I know it's my mother-in-law and I didn't really feel like talking to her, so I figured I should just pretend that I'm asleep and she won't come upstairs. I heard the footsteps of her coming up the stairs then, but she was moving really slowly. I think it was weird, but figured she knew we were sleeping and didn't want to wake us. My back is facing the door to my bedroom and I hear the door open. I get into my pretend I'm asleep mode and stay still. I hear a quick breath of air as if she was startled to see us asleep. No other noise is made and I assume that she's just standing there. I think to myself, alright, go away now. But it takes a full minute or so before I slowly hear her backing up out of the room, going downstairs and suddenly leaving the house. As soon as I hear the door chime, I pop out of bed and walk downstairs to grab the diapers. There aren't any. I think, what the hell? She showed up and didn't even leave any. I then run over to the front window and she's gone. During this whole event, my phone was off and charging, so I turn it on and see that I have a new voicemail. It's from my mother-in-law. Sorry honey, I'm not going to be able to come over and bring those diapers. I got caught up in other plans. Have a nice nap.
I never thought to share this story here, but a few months ago I posted about it briefly in another subreddit, and everyone suggested I share it here also. Some of you may have seen it the last time I shared it. I believe the day after the 4th of July, and my husband and I were in the middle of a cross-country road trip. We were driving through Texas, and for any of you who have driven across the entire state of Texas, you know that it is very long and very barren. Sometimes we go hours without seeing anything at all, and the towns we did pass through didn't consist of much more than a rusty old gas station and a few dusty little houses. Looking out the window, you would swear you were just driving through the same 5 miles of desert again and again. I had started to get a headache, and my husband suggested I take a quick nap to get rid of it. I remember allowing myself to doze off as I watched the beautiful colours of the desert sunset. The slowing of the car woke me up, and the first thing I noticed is how dark it was. I believe it was around 10 PM. My husband had stopped at a gas station with a small shop. He told me he was going in to grab us some food, and asked if I needed to pee. Knowing I might not have another chance for quite a while, I went into the shop and used the restroom. Both the men's and women's restrooms were down a little hall from the open area of the shop. I was groggy and tired and realised how badly I needed to pee, so I shuffled into the restroom. As I made the way the short distance from the door to the nearest 2 stalls, I made eye contact with a woman coming out of the only other stall. She didn't quite look homeless, but she was definitely messy looking. She had wild grey hair, almost shoulder length if it hadn't been sticking out of every direction from her head. It looked like it hadn't seen a brush in weeks. She was wearing ragged looking clothing, a pair of ill-fitting black workout shorts, and I remember noting her foam flip-flops. Several layers on top, one of them being a large purple and green coat. Keep in mind that this is Texas in July. The jacket was hanging on her shoulders, crooked, like she hadn't been bothered to take more than a few seconds to put it on. She was carrying something in a tied up plastic grocery bag. I gave her a quick smile as our eyes met, and she just stared at me in return. Then her face turned wild and intense looking. Her eyebrows were set as if she was angry, but her eyes had a wild, alive look. She looked at me like she was hungry, and this was when I felt the first tinge of something wrong. I tried to brush it off. She waddled over to the sink, and I took my time shutting the stall door, because something about her posture in the front of the mirror struck me as pretty odd, and I was trying to figure it out. She was standing with her body more angled towards me, but her face was turned to the mirror. Her body was tensed, legs slightly crouched, as if she was ready to act. Her hands were not up by her face, or trying to fix the mess of hair, or even being washed. They were at her sides' elbows, also slightly bent. I wasn't sure why, but I suddenly felt uncomfortable. I regretted leaving my purse and cell phone behind. I shut and locked the stall door, and took my time using the toilet. I wanted her to be gone before I left the safety of the stall. I stayed there for long after I had finished, but the woman was still there, so I waited longer. Finally, I heard the smacking of her flip-flops as she made her way to the door. I heard it open and then slam closed. The door was pretty heavy, and had slammed the same way when I had entered. I stayed for a moment and allowed the wave of relief to wash me over, before I reached for the lock. Then I paused, fingers only an inch from the lock. I stayed as silent as I possibly could, to try and confirm what I just thought. Yes, I heard breathing. The woman had only pretended to leave. At this point I was scared and confused. Why had she tried to trick me into thinking she had left to only stick around to be as quiet as possible? I knew something was very wrong, so I stayed in the stall even longer, and this time it must have been at least 20 minutes. But I had no way of knowing for how long I stayed in the stall. I could tell from the direction of her breathing was coming from the side she had positioned herself in the far corner, right next to the door, but far enough that I couldn't see her feet. Finally, I heard her leave. This time I waited a few minutes to make sure she hadn't tried her trick again. I slipped out the stall, quickly washed my hands, and rushed down the hallway to the store. It was pitch black outside, and I had no idea where she was. She couldn't be far. A large man was checking out the register, so I waited near the window display until he left the store and quietly slipped out the door behind him. Sure enough, crouched right outside the front door is the woman. She seemed surprised as she stood and turned away, walking quickly around the side of the store. My husband was waiting in the car and asked me if I was okay since I had taken so much longer than usual, and I said I would tell him all about it once we were away from the store. The Redditors who previously read about my experience had many theories, but the two most common ones were that she was a druggie that wanted to mug me, or that she worked with sex trafficking. I am open to any of your theories. I tried to see if there was anything in the news from around that time, but I couldn't figure out exactly where we were when this happened.